The military transport touched down just before sunrise. After 11 months overseas, Navy SEAL Lieutenant Jake Morrison finally stepped onto American soil. He was 42 years old, a decorated Navy SEAL veteran, a single father, and a man who had spent nearly a year believing in one thing every night. Home. Not medals, not promotions, not money. Home. His two children were waiting for him, 10-year-old Ava and 7-year-old Ethan. Jake had carried their photographs everywhere during deployment. When the nights were dangerous, he looked at Ava's smile. When exhaustion nearly broke him, he remembered Ethan's voice saying, "Daddy, come home soon." And Jake had promised, "I will." Now he was finally keeping that promise. He left the airport carrying one duffel bag and a small cardboard box containing his medals. His old pickup truck was still parked where he'd left it. He climbed inside. For the first time in almost a year, Jake smiled. He could already imagine Ava running toward him, Ethan jumping into his arms, the little house on Maple Street, the red front door, the children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, his late wife's photograph sitting on the fireplace. Everything he had fought to protect, everything he had come home for. But when Jake turned onto Maple Street, his smile disappeared. He slowed the truck, then stopped completely. His house was gone. There was no red door, no porch, no mailbox, no children's bicycles, nothing. Only an empty piece of land surrounded by yellow construction tape. Jake stared through the windshield. His breathing became shallow. He checked the address, 214 Maple Street. The address was correct. He stepped out of the truck. A construction worker noticed him. "Sir." Jake pointed toward the empty lot. "Where's the house?" The worker looked confused. "This property was demolished 6 months ago." Jake's face went pale. "Demolished?" "Yeah, the city cleared the whole block." "Why?" The worker shrugged. "Redevelopment project. You should talk to the developer." Jake pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking. He called the number listed for his property. Disconnected. He called his children's school. No answer. He called the neighbor who had promised to watch the children. Straight to voicemail. Jake's heart began pounding. He tried again. Nothing. Then his phone finally rang. It was an unknown number. Jake answered immediately. A woman's voice spoke carefully. "Is this Jake Morrison?" "Yes. This is Mrs. Turner from the County Family Services office." Jake froze. "Where are my children?" There was a long silence. Then, "Mr. Morrison, I need you to come to our office." His stomach dropped. "Has there been a situation involving my children?" "What situation?" "I'll explain when you arrive." Jake's voice became firm. "I'm their father." "I know." "Then tell me where they are." Another pause. "They're safe." Jake closed his eyes. "Where?" "They're currently staying with temporary guardians." The world seemed to stop. "Temporary guardians?" "Yes." Jake gripped the phone. "Who are they?" "We can discuss that in person." "No." His voice cracked. "You will tell me right now." The woman sighed. "Your children were found alone in the house 3 months ago." Jake stared at the empty lot. "That's impossible. I have a military deployment record. I arranged childcare. I spoke with my children every week." "I know." "Then how were they alone?" The woman lowered her voice. "That's what we're trying to determine." Jake immediately drove to the county office. He barely remembered the journey. His mind kept repeating the same sentence. My children were alone. When he entered the building, a social worker named Sarah Bennett stood waiting. She was holding a thick file. Jake walked toward her. "Where are Ava and Ethan?" Sarah looked at him. "Before I answer that, you need to understand. Where are my children?" Sarah finally whispered, "They're with the Whitmore family." Jake's jaw tightened. "Who are the Whitmores?" "A temporary foster family." He stared at her. "You put my children with strangers. They needed somewhere safe. They have a father. You were deployed. I was serving my country. I understand." "No." Jake's voice shook. "Don't." He placed both hands on the desk. "I left my children in their home." Sarah opened the file. "According to our records, the property was transferred into another person's name 7 months ago." Jake's eyes widened. "Transferred? Someone signed documents authorizing the sale." "I never sold my house." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "The signature says otherwise." Jake stared at the paperwork. Then he saw it. A signature that looked almost exactly like his. But it wasn't his. Someone had forged his name. Someone had sold his house. Someone had taken his children. And someone had made sure he wouldn't know until it was too late. Jake slowly lifted his eyes. "Who reported my children missing?" Sarah hesitated. "Your children's school. 3 months ago." "Who was supposed to be caring for them?" Sarah looked down. "The person listed in your emergency contact records." Jake's face changed. "Who?" She slid a document across the desk. Jake read the name. His blood ran cold. Ryan Morrison. His younger brother. The same brother Jake had not spoken to in 6 years. The same brother who had once begged him for money. The same brother Jake had cut out of his life after discovering he had stolen from their mother. Jake whispered, "Ryan." Sarah nodded. "He told us you had given him legal authority over the children." Jake immediately shook his head. "I never did. We don't know yet if the documents were forged." Jake looked toward the window. Rain had begun falling outside. For 11 months, he had dreamed about coming home. Now he realized something terrifying. While he was overseas, someone had been quietly dismantling his life. His house, his finances, his identity, his children, everything. Jake looked at Sarah. "Take me to them." She hesitated. "You can't see them yet." Jake stared at her. "It's a temporary court order." "Based on what?" "Allegations." "Allegations." Sarah opened the file. Then she said something that made Jake's blood run cold. "Your brother told the court that you were emotionally unstable." Jake said nothing. "And that your military deployment had made you dangerous." Silence. Sarah continued, He claimed the children were afraid of you. Jake's eyes filled with tears. Afraid. He looked down at the photograph in his wallet. Ava had drawn it months earlier. A picture of 3 people holding hands. Jake, Ava, Ethan. Above them she'd written, "My hero is coming home." Jake closed his wallet. His sadness slowly turned into determination. "Mrs. Bennett. Yes, I've survived combat. I know. Survived losing people I loved. I know. Nobody." He looked directly into her eyes. "Nobody takes my children from me." Sarah studied him for a moment, then quietly said, "There's something else." Jake frowned. "What?" She placed another photograph on the desk. It showed Ava and Ethan standing beside an expensive black SUV. Jake recognized the vehicle immediately. It belonged to his brother. But behind the children, standing in the doorway of a massive mansion, was a woman Jake had never seen before. Sarah whispered, "That's where your children are staying now." Jake stared at the photograph. Then he noticed something. Ava wasn't smiling, and Ethan was holding something tightly in his hand, a folded piece of paper. Jake zoomed in. His heart stopped. Written across the paper in a child's handwriting were 4 words. "Daddy, please find us." Jake looked up. His voice became almost a whisper. "How soon can I get them back?" Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she looked at the file and said, "Mr. Morrison, there's one more thing you need to know." "What?" "Your brother didn't do this alone." Jake's eyes narrowed. Sarah slowly pushed another document across the desk. At the bottom was a name Jake recognized instantly, a name connected to his past, a person he believed had died years ago. Jake's face turned completely white because suddenly he understood. His deployment hadn't been the reason his family was destroyed. It had been the opportunity, and whoever planned this had been waiting for him to come home.